Good afternoon, everyone, including those who are watching on the live stream. This afternoon, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to Chatham House His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta. President Kenyatta will be the first Kenyan president to speak at Chatham House, so it's a particularly important occasion. I'll say a little bit in a moment about Kenya and the significance of this afternoon, but before I do have to do a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, please can I ask all of you to turn your phones onto silent. There is no filming or recording or live streaming of the event without the permission of Chatham House, and actually I think it's going to be so interesting that you shouldn't be filming anyway, but there you go, that's me. Please do tweet using the hashtag CHAfrica, so Chatham House Africa. And can I remind everyone that although we are in Chatham House, this meeting is not under the Chatham House rule. So it's on the record, so you can use information from the meeting, and when you're tweeting, you actually can identify who has said what. So again, thank you all very much for joining us. So let me introduce His Excellency, who's the fourth and current president of Kenya. He's the leader of the Jubilee Party and was first elected to the presidency in 2013. His Excellency was sworn in for a second term in November 2017, and prior to assuming presidential office, he served in government in a number of different roles. Now, we all know that Kenya is strategically important for the region, for the African continent, and also internationally. We've all watched, Mr. President, the economic success of Kenya. We've watched the investment particularly in infrastructure and electricity, but you also face some challenges. There have been some political challenges, and I think we're all very delighted to see the rapprochement that we have seen recently. But there is also, within your region, the conflicts in Somalia and South Sudan, which have had a particular challenge for the region and have had a major impact on Kenya, a country that has welcomed in a significant number of refugees. I know from my own time at the United Nations how much we valued the fact of Kenya playing that role. I have always felt that we have not sufficiently thanked Kenya for doing that, and that it has had a major impact domestically in terms of not only the attempts to promote inclusivity in the country, but also in terms of the instability which has been caused around some of the issues related to safety and security. You have a huge domestic agenda going forward, not only related to that inclusivity, but also related to tackling poverty and finding ways to ensure that a greater proportion of the population are able to feel the fruits of the economic growth that has been significant in Kenya over the last few years. So we very much look forward to hearing from you this afternoon, to hearing from you about your priorities going forward in terms of the domestic agenda, but also the role you see Kenya playing internationally. Now, I did ask the President how long he was going to speak for. He said 20 minutes. I said, was that a real 20 minutes or a presidential 20 minutes? It is real. He tells me it's a real 20 minutes. Now, I happen to have known the President for a very long time, so at 20 minutes, Mr. President, if you haven't finished, I'm going to find some kind of way of indicating to you that you may wish to begin to sum up. Because as you can see, we have a very full audience and they have a lot of questions they want to ask you. Okay. Mr. President, welcome again to Chatham House. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll go across that. Good afternoon, everybody. First and foremost, let me just begin by saying that I take this opportunity to thank Chatham House, and indeed all of you. It's a pleasure to join you this afternoon. And I'm honored by your invitation. But let me get straight to the point, given that I have only 20 minutes, and acknowledge that we live in tumultuous times, and change has become more rapid than it has ever been in human history. Everywhere around the world, the political certainties of yesterday are giving way to new insecurities, largely driven by a powerful and borderless information age. Voices that would have been judged extreme are finding their ways to the center of power and governance, and this has had both positive, but we must also acknowledge, negative effects. In a time like this, we leaders must seek stability, while at the same time undertaking ambitious efforts to shape a future that responds to the need of our people. That is the challenge of governing today. And this is a challenge on every continent. To know what needs stabilizing and what must also change. Nearly 70 years ago, Harold Macmillan famously spoke of a wind of change blowing right across Africa. The time for change had come, and there was little that could be done to stand in the way of freedom and independence. We as Africans took on our independence as a chance to shape a new destiny that would build a new continent and new nations, and with it, a belief and a hope to deliver to our people health, education, peace, and stability. Kenya has grown into a democracy without a peer in our region. But that has not been without its challenges, as I'm sure the evening news here has had occasion to remind each and every one of you. We have also developed the most diverse and most vibrant economy in our region. And throughout these decades of building, reforming, and growing, the United Kingdom has been an ally as well as a business partner. We have worked together to bring peace and stability to a troubled region. We have defended freedom and democracy together from the extremists who employ terrorism to undermine our way of life. And our people have traded with one another as well as invested in each other. Our friendship is built on solid foundations, and the decades of collaboration have only deepened it. To take it to new heights, however, will require more than a celebration of the past. We must also better understand the winds of change that are sweeping across our continent and indeed the world today, so that we can craft a partnership that is more fit for purpose. One that can deliver more value and more relevance for Kenyans and British citizens who are demanding that we listen to them and change with the times to serve them even better as governments, but as well as civil society. For the sake of time, let me just single out 3 areas that offer us opportunities for growth as partners. The first is that our partnership needs to be aware of a new worldwide impatience with the compromise, the debate, and the respect for opposing views that democracy demands. There is today a growing temptation for some in the mainstream governing parties to seek political advantage in extreme positions that erode unity, a sense of national purpose, and paint compromise as betrayal. They seek a permanently divided body politic and non-stop political campaigning at the expense of countries doing the hard work of building prosperity. I believe we need to face this tendency together. First, by understanding that positive change is difficult to enact in a climate of permanent political instability, yet knowing that stability should not in itself be an excuse to remain rigid and resistant to change. Mainstream politics in Kenya, in Britain, and everywhere else in the democratic world must be responsive to the needs of the people. My reaching out to the Honorable Raila Odinga and the opposition after our elections must be seen in this context, and not one of opening up a new political front. We cannot achieve the social and economic needs of our people in an environment of constant political bickering. As much as political competition is an essential component of democracy, leadership on all sides of the political divide must rise above the noise and focus on the needs of the people. That is the difference, I believe, between the politics of democracy and mature democracies. Mature democracies that can rise above competitive electoral politics to issue-based politics that seek the enhancement of people's lives and the long-term peace, stability, and prosperity of our nations. Practically, what this means is that together, we must look to reinforce constructive voices that promote non-partisan or bipartisan solutions to our pressing problems. There are too many risks we all face and too many pitfalls in today's world that we don't need as leaders to add to them with meaningless political rhetoric. The second area is to appreciate that democracy struggles to survive when it is surrounded by tyranny. Our friendship needs to respond to the enemies of democracy rather than leave the battlefield and retreat behind walls. We have indeed won victories together, disrupted and deterred multiple plots that have killed many of our citizens. And we must continue to work together to defeat terrorist groups that threaten much of our people and our countries. Much more coordination and collaboration can be achieved, but we must go even further. The violence employed by terrorists is an extension of their ideas. They daily announce their intention to destroy democracy and to usher in an age of fanaticism and religious tyranny. We can do more to fight their ideas, not only by denying them legitimacy and relevance, but by advancing together a powerful vision of why democracy is the most effective and successful way to deliver better lives for our people. And we must make it harder for the anti-democratic, hate-filled fanatics who are organized against liberty and trying to turn our citizens against one another. And for this, we in Kenya also look forward to you to use your useful positions in forums such as the United Nations to advance a more powerful consensus beyond just condemning terrorist violence and acting against religious and ethnic hatred and exclusivity. We want to partner with you to more closely in challenging social media companies to be responsive to the extremist threats aimed at Kenya as they are those targeting Europe. Because we know that this disdain for our freedom by the extremists transcends all borders. We can work together to build stronger initiatives to prevent recruitment into terrorism and to more effectively disengage and rehabilitate foreign terrorist fighters who have defected and returned home. We must also act together to equip our people to counter the threats of weaponized information, which is now perhaps the most insidious tool of the new age. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to work together for the peace and stability of countries like South Sudan and Somalia, that not only because of the problems they have, undermine their own ability to achieve peace, stability, and prosperity for their own people, but also act as havens to destabilize their neighboring countries. As potent a threat as terrorism is, it pales in comparison to the last measure, which is the continuing poverty and joblessness in much of Africa. As long as there's great poverty and desperation in Africa and other parts of the world, African refugees will seek entry into Europe in their millions. Your own politics will shift in response to that influx, and probably, as we have seen, not necessarily for the better. This is one instance where cause and effect are inextricable. Poverty in Africa will lead to instability in Europe. As one of the many African leaders with a growing youthful population, I recognize that we must build a much stronger economy if we are to ensure that the blessings of our demographic dividend does not turn into a curse for ourselves and indeed yourselves. Our youthful population must have access to economic opportunities that lift our country and continent to greater heights and maintain our peace and unity. So as I said, the third area, therefore requiring our urgent collaboration, is in the building of prosperity that offers jobs and opportunity to our young people. There is no more powerful engine for lifting millions out of poverty than entrepreneurship and trade. London is the global center of banking and investment. It is a city that urgently seeks out more investments and opportunities as well as higher yields. Kenya and East Africa as a whole is full of energetic and ambitious young people who can build goods and services for a rapidly growing middle class and population. We need to do more to lower the cultural, bureaucratic, and communications barrier to that investment. You can do more to support British investors making bets on big opportunities in Kenya. You can make it easier for Kenyan business people to travel to the UK. You can be ambitious in crafting a trade deal with Kenya that will be a shining example to the rest of the Commonwealth and the world. And we will walk with you each step of the way. On our part as Kenya, we can do much more to lower the barriers to investment at scale. And you will have noted that we have made aggressive reforms in the ease of doing business during my first term, and I intend to do even more. Our infrastructure will be ready for investment and sharply increase trade, and there are big opportunities for the private sector to deliver solutions in my administration's Big Four plan to to transform Kenya's agriculture, healthcare, manufacturing, and affordable housing. The Kenyan and British people are marked by their pragmatism. We must marry that sense of practicality to ambition, optimism, and courage to embrace a future that is already here to deliver success in the 3 areas that I have outlined. I look forward to the conversations and debates to come, and most of all, to the mighty works that I believe we can build together. I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And I don't know what a gold star is for presidents who keep to time, but you've done even better than that. You're sort of gold plus, because you've gained us 5 minutes. So we're now going to have the Q&A. If you would like to ask a question, I will indicate to... Yes, well, the hands are going up already. There are just a few rules I'd like to set out, not many. One, when I ask you to ask your question, if you would say who you are and what your affiliation is. Could I ask you to keep your questions brief rather than making your speech yourself? If you do attempt to make a speech yourself, I will stop you. There may also be questions coming in from those who are watching the live stream, so it's possible that we'll have some other questions as well. But please do now indicate. What I suggest we do, so we can take the maximum number of questions, is perhaps to take 3 at a time. So I'll start with the gentleman there.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, and good afternoon, audience. My name is Godson Azu, the convener of London Political Summit and a correspondent for PEN Television here in London. Mr. President, sir, in the last couple of weeks, you have set a very new pace in African political landscape by bridging the gap of reconciliation in political conflict between the opposition and the ruling party. What you have done has never been done by anyone in the African political history. I want to ask, since that pace has been set, what has been your advice to fellow African leaders who are still insisting that when they lose an election, they refuse to vacate office? And even when they refuse to vacate office, they refuse to find a lasting reconciliatory position with the opposition, because it's a critical political issue in Africa, and you have set a pace. Thank you very much.
It's a good thing I said 3 at a time, because it gives you some time to think. I'll ask the gentleman here.
Chris Chapman, Amnesty International. Your Excellency, I hope that inclusive growth also means not just embracing the political differences, but also the great diversity that the Kenyan nation has. Kenya's indigenous peoples have their contribution to make to inclusive growth. They have their own perspectives to offer. In the forests where some of them live, they want to join hands with government and help to protect and conserve those forests, which is surely crucial to sustainable growth in Kenya. Unfortunately, the government has been evicting them from those forests, and it hasn't demonstrated that the indigenous peoples are actually degrading the forests, which is the reason that they're citing. The government seems to think...
Question?
Yeah. The government is thinking that it can do a better job itself at protecting the forests, but it hasn't demonstrated that either, as the new Cabinet Secretary has found out. So my question to you, respectfully, Your Excellency, is should the government not be considering a new approach?
Thank you. And I'll take one more in this middle section. I'll come to you in a while, if I may. Gentleman there. Yep, and then I'm going to come over to the right. So, behind, yep.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Peter Clark, and I'm representing the Alumni Association of the London School of Economics. I want to ask you about your blockchain initiative and artificial intelligence, which is really fascinating, and if you could elaborate on it. But before I sit down, I wanted to determine if you had ever regretted not going to Williams, my alma mater, and whether or not you regretted not going to Williams and Amherst instead. Okay.
Thank you. We'll take those, and then I'm going to come over to the right, then I'm going to come over to the left, then I'm going to come back to the middle, just so that you know how I'm going to do this. Mr. President.
Thank you.
I can't wait to hear your answer to the first question.
Well, let me start with Azu. You asked the question of what advice do I have to my fellow Africans? And I think the only advice I have is that which we have consistently been saying. And that is, if Africa is to achieve the objectives that we have set out for ourselves, which is inclusive growth, which is peace, which is stability, which is prosperity that actually reaches everybody. That cannot be done in isolation, and we need one another. Just as we reach out to each other as nations, and with this growing understanding that we have, that even in order to be able to expand both trade and investment and ultimately create jobs, we need to break down some of the barriers that have existed since colonial times, and to begin to appreciate that we must trade and allow our people to move freely. So equally within countries, we need to have that same understanding that countries can also not achieve their objectives if, as I have just said now, we are in a never-ending spiral of political competition. Political competition, as I have said, is part of any democracy. But I believe that mature democracies recognize that we can have opposing views, but still be able to reach bipartisan agreements on all those matters that concern our people. We are not looking to lead different people, we're looking to lead the same people. We have so much to achieve in order to ensure we create full employment, in order to ensure we create proper health facilities for our people, in order to ensure that we have the right educational facilities. We cannot do all these things without one another. So mine, as I consistently say, is to encourage leaders to allow constructive debate that allows people to come together to discuss those issues that we share in common. We are still at very low levels of development, and we can never and will never achieve our objectives if we are constantly engaged and at each other's necks. There comes a time when we must come together, and that is what we have done in Kenya. I think with regard to the diversity of Kenya, nobody is Christian, nobody recognizes that more than we do. Our constitution, in fact, recognizes it and acknowledges it and says that every single Kenyan must be treated with the same respect and is entitled to all the rights. And we must recognize diversity in all the actions that we do. That's there in our constitution. We accept it and we're working towards it. That is partially the reason why we moved into the new devolved systems of government, in order to allow increased people participation in decision-making on key and critical issues. What you are referring to is, and I know there's one or two areas that have the problem that you're saying, but I think we need to distinguish between two things. We need to distinguish between those people who are and always have been traditionally part and parcel of the forest environment, and those people who have chosen to encroach into forests for agricultural purposes, leading to a total destruction of our environment. There is need to distinguish between the two, and sometimes I think we're not able to have a clear distinction. And if we could have that, because ours is not to interfere with traditional communities who have lived there. We've done a lot to protect the Kaya forests and allowing the people in those areas who use those areas for traditional rights and other things to continue enjoying their practices in those areas. We have those who are still practicing as hunter-gatherers in Boni Forest, in Mao Forest as well. But we cannot allow those people who are encroaching on forest land for commercial purposes. And I think that's where we need to have a very clear distinction, and people need to work together so that we are able to understand that those who are being evicted are those who are destroying the environment, and if we destroy that environment, what are we leaving behind for our children? So I think there's need for some clarity there. I stand clearly with you on the indigenous peoples, but we must be able to distinguish them between those who also are encroaching and destroying the environment and thereby destroying the future, also for future generations as well. I think there was a question on blockchain. I must admit that we are still in very, very, very early stages. We are right now talking to a number of people, and equally we have our financial regulators, the central bank and others, who are equally quite concerned about, which is not just, it's not peculiar to Kenya. I think financial regulators across the globe are concerned about the impact of blockchain and whether it can be regulated and what impact can it have on the overall financial markets and the money markets, and are we able to regulate it in a manner that is also not going to be used as a medium for illicit cash transfer. So these are all things that we're looking at, but we are keen, and we're hoping that within the next couple of months that we should be able to be in a position where we can experiment and see whether this is something that can bear fruit and help, especially for us who are quite keen, as you know, in terms of money transfer and mobile money transfer. We're quite innovative and quite eager to look at new ways that can enhance the use of technology to deliver services to people. So we're not going to rule it out, and we're going to continue working through. And I'm certain that once we've gone through our experimental stage, you'll hear a bit more. Do I have any regret about Williams and Amherst? I have no regret about Amherst. Well, that competition, I can assure you, 30 years down the road, still exists.
Thank you. I'll take questions over here. So is the gentleman way over? You have to wait for the, I'm not going to come back to the middle for a while, so you'll just have to wait.
Your Excellency, my name is Brian Muriuki. I run the Royal Dutch Shell upstream business for Kenya and East Africa. One of the key enablers, I believe, for your Big Four agenda is energy and access to energy. And I'd be quite keen to hear your thoughts on how you see, indeed, access to energy as helping to deliver on that Big Four agenda and what your government's priorities are in terms around access to energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there no women who want to ask questions? Come on, don't let me down now. Okay, good, I'll come back to you. The lady there, thank you.
Oh, hello.
Thank
my
you.
name is Mokami Jindo, and I'm an accountant with Knight Frank. And my question is regarding, I know we've just had the elections, but it's regarding 2022. Are there any plans for us in the diaspora to be able to vote then? Because I know the last time there was rumors that we were going to be able to, but then we didn't get a chance to. So I'm just wondering whether there's anything in place for us to be able to do that in the next coming elections. Thank you.
Nice and forward-looking, great. And one more there, I'll come back to you next time.
My name is Julius Baluto. I'm a journalist, editor for Informa East Africa, but also a broadcast journalist here in the UK. Good to see you, Mr. President, in this particular new dispensation of handshake. But I wanted to, Mr. President, I want to ask you, in this spirit of handshake, what does a handshake translate to when it comes to diaspora? Do you have a diaspora agenda? You know, I just came from Zimbabwe, but the last sentence that stuck in my mind coming from Zimbabwe was listening to a leader who was calling upon diaspora, telling us 7 million Zimbabweans left Zimbabwe. And in this particular new change, he was calling upon the diaspora from Zimbabwe, telling them, please come back home. You are our children. We love you. Mr. President, diaspora is awash with skill base. Opportunities are there for the big four. What agenda do we have to bring back diaspora to invest, to participate, and also to feel like Kenyans appreciate it?
Thank you. Now you all get ready. I'm coming to you in the next round.
Muriuki, on energy, this has been a key pillar of especially our first 4 years as an administration. You know, when we came into office, only 32% of Kenyans had access to electricity or to energy. 4 years down the road, we've managed to push that figure from 32%, now closing to 58%, and hoping to move it over the next 4 years to 74, 75% of all Kenyans being able to afford and to have access to energy. And we're doing this because we believe it is a key driver. It is a key enabler of the agenda that we have set forward to ourselves. It is a key enabler in helping those people who were previously left out have access to some of the things in many parts of the world that are taken for granted. Access to electricity has enabled us to be able to start up markets that previously had died off, and is bringing back that 24-hour economy, people having fridges, people being able to store and improve the cold chain, which has been a major problem in terms of food losses, being able to create new opportunities via setting up various internet cafes and allowing technology to also be available to those in the rural areas as it has been to those in urban areas. So to us, it's a key enabler of helping us achieve our agenda of creating employment and dealing with one of the big problems, as I mentioned earlier, which is job creation for our young people. So this is an agenda that we are hoping to push and we're hoping to fast track. And again, as I said earlier this morning, as a government, the key drive that we have now is to move out of generation, because we believe generation, and we have proved with a number of examples of a number of companies now who have established generation capacity and have engaged with the government on a power purchase arrangement. So generation, we believe, can strongly be handled by the private sector. We are now moving to transmission, where again we think we can partner with private sector in transmission. So the limited resources that we have as government can all be pushed to the last mile. That helps create greater access. And we believe that if we can get this really rolling, there is no reason why by 2025, and our target originally had been 2030, but by 2025, why all Kenyans, 100% of Kenyans, should not be able to have access to electricity and energy. So that's the direction we're moving in there. Mukami 2022, as you know, this came in with the new constitution of 2010. 2013, we weren't ready. This time, a number of Kenyans, especially around the region, were able to vote. And we're hoping that by 2022, all the necessary mechanisms will be in place so that the entire Kenyan diaspora can actually participate in the 2022 elections. So that is work in progress. And I strongly believe, and what we have been told, is that Kenyans in the diaspora 2022 will be able to participate after the trial that was done with the region. I think the issues of handshakes. I think what we need to be able to understand is that what is our desire? When we look at the agenda we have, when we look at the agenda the opposition was also presenting to the people of Kenya. We want a better life for our people. We want better health for our people. We want jobs for our young people. We want to be able to give people affordable housing. We want to ensure we have food security and affordable at that. We're not going to be able to do this shouting at one another. We need to bring Kenyans together and say, if we agree on these issues, despite the fact that we may differ on other political agenda, on these ones we can come together and bring our people together and achieve it. Because if we achieve it, we're achieving it for all Kenyans. Our supporters as the ruling party, your supporters as the opposition. So it is not, it is a Kenyan agenda that we hope to deliver. And we acknowledge that we can't deliver it alone. We need one another to be able to do so. And so that's why we say we don't need to constantly be engaged in competitive politics 24/7. There comes a time when we say, on these issues, let us have bipartisan agreement. On the issues that we can't agree, we can say we can face up to those in the next election, but we don't have to keep our people 24-hour a day engaged in politics at the expense of the needs of our people. So that is the way I want to look at it. And in terms of welcoming the diaspora, we totally, openly welcome our diaspora. In fact, we have set up an office under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for diaspora affairs. We welcome all our diaspora. In fact, we see them as the frontline investors who will encourage and bring along with them other foreign direct investment. Kenya is your home. You are welcome. We encourage you to come, just as we are encouraging. And as you know, we have removed in Kenya, and I did so in our December 12th, or my December 12th statement. We have removed visas for all Africans who wish to travel to Kenya. We say you are free to travel, to do business in Kenya, because we believe it is just by bringing the continent together that we'll be able to achieve our objective. Equally, we have said that all East Africans are free to come, live, work, own property, own land, do business, as if they were in their respective countries. So there is no way we would be reaching out to the rest of Africa and ignore to reach out to our own Kenyan diaspora. You are welcome home, and we are encouraging you, and anything that we can do to facilitate you, please let us know.
You may just regret that. There's a lady at the back, and then, oh, good, we've got the ladies putting up their hand. Then there's a lady immediately in front of her, and then there's a gentleman here.
His Excellency.
Asante.
My name is Rosemary Adigor, and thank you so much for bringing this glorious weather that really embodies the spirit of Kenya. I've got my glasses. So I've got just a few questions to ask you.
You're allowed one.
Oh, really? Well, what I want to talk about is inclusivity. What are you going to do to have a more inclusive government? Because this is the cancer that has really eaten our society, whereby a boy, Salim from Masabit, and a girl from Vihiga are able to get employment purely on merit and not on their second names. So can I ask another one?
No, that's it. Thank you. I want to get as many people in as possible. If you could pass the mic to the lady just in front, thank you.
My name's Claire Milhench. I'm from Reuters.
Sorry, your name is?
Claire Milhench. I'm from Reuters. I have a question about the rate cap. What are you going to do about that? Will you be scrapping it or modifying it in some way? If you can give any details on that. And then just a more general question about debt.
No, I've said one question. Thank you very much. And there was a gentleman, yes, just here. Thank you.
My name is Dr. Lucas Jenga, Chief Executive Officer of Diaspora Community Support Services based in Glasgow, Scotland.
You're all coming out now, aren't you, the diaspora? Isn't that fantastic?
And it's a great privilege to be in this wonderful meeting. Thank you, Your Excellence, for such an inspiring speech, which has really addressed a lot of issues that we've been thinking and contemplating about. Mine is a simple one. Scotland seems to be very far away from London, which is not real. It's actually 45 minutes away from here by air. But we seem to be completely isolated when it comes to real engagement in the diaspora. And I say this because although we get occasional visits, which we appreciate very much from the embassies, we feel that Scotland leads in innovation, in renewable energy, in many aspects of impartation to development, and SDI is doing amazing work in East Africa. We feel, as participants, fully engaged with what is happening in Kenya, would be more encouraged if we had a direct engagement with the government through Scotland-initiated initiatives from the government. Thank you, sir.
I think they want to visit.
By the sound of it. First and foremost, let me answer Rosemary on the issue of inclusivity. Again, referring back to our constitution is very clear on the issue of inclusivity, that nobody can be denied employment on the basis of their ethnicity. In fact, part and parcel of the work of the national cohesion is to look at that particular issue. It was set up specifically to look at that. But we're not going to say that that still doesn't remain a challenge for our country. And in fact, that is why we have, if you look at most of the areas where government recruits, it recruits on the basis not even of county. When it comes to military recruitment, police recruitment, recruitment of all the major government agencies that take up the bulk, we do it at the district level to ensure that no single community has been left behind. In fact, when we had a clear indication, as many of you will probably know who are Kenyan as well, we've had many communities who for a long time have not been recognized. We have added the number of communities who are now recognized as Kenyans, including some from Mozambique who have lived in Kenya for the last 40 years, the Makonde group who have been now made Kenyan citizens and recognized as a community. And in fact, the first recruitments of people from that community, because they were not able to get jobs before because they had no ideas, has now started to take place. All of these are aimed at ensuring that we have inclusivity and equity in government employment. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that indeed it's happened, because it's not going to happen, overnight. But the direction is clear, and I believe that my administration is quite clear on the need for us to have inclusivity, not just ethnic inclusivity, but also gender inclusivity. And this is something that we are actively and aggressively continuing to work on. Claire, you had a question on rate caps. Indeed, we have, and we passed that law on rate caps. Again, we must understand the context in which that was done. But I believe that a year down the road, we have learned our lessons. We are currently engaged with Parliament with a view of either repealing or modifying. This is an engagement that we're having with the National Assembly. But we all recognize the limitations of the law in the way it is currently structured. And we recognize that there is need to either repeal it altogether or to modify it so as to deal with some of the issues and the concerns that have come, especially from the financial sector. We all can see the impact that we had hoped it would have in terms of lowering the cost of money to the SMEs especially, has not happened. In fact, it has dried up credit to that sector. And I believe there is now recognition across the board that that is something that we have to deal with and engage ourselves with, and I'm certain that as we are now getting into our Finance Bill 2018-2019, that is a key issue that we hope to address with the National Assembly. Then the issue of Scotland being isolated. Well, we are happy that Scotland still has decided, despite Brexit, to remain in the United Kingdom. And we believe that 45 minutes is not too far. So I will ensure that next time we have delegations that are coming to London, that they will also recognize that there is great potential in Scotland, and they are our Kenyan diaspora who are there, and ensure that we visit them equally and show them and expose them to the new opportunities, especially now that we're moving into the oil and gas sector. We believe there is a lot we can learn from Scotland that can bring great benefit to Kenya.
Does the we include you?
The we includes me.
Okay, there you go. See what I delivered for you? Not bad. This gentleman had his hand up, going to take him, and then the lady right at the back, and then the lady over here on the end.
Maybe my topic is a little bit different. Mheshimiwa, I am from borderline country where the Gosha people, which is Jubaland, where the more activities are there.
Huh?
Activity, Al-Shabaab is there, where you are fighting. Thank you, Mr. President, your policy while helping Somali people. It's very important to be stable region. But one thing now, I realize that AMISOM is transforming. Do you have any agenda for the Jubaland people where 1924, Jubaland was a part of Kenya? And we rejected that to be in Kenya.
I'm getting really worried now.
No.
Please don't ask us to change borders at this meeting.
Please. This gentleman, I just asked him to take an agenda in his own area to solve this problem. This is the only position can express my dilemma, my problem. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But I just want to put on the agenda that we're not going to change borders at this meeting. No. The lady right at the back.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Angela. I'm a digital service specialist.
Your name is?
And my question is following up on Claire's question on interest caps. And I just wanted to know what the plan is for the country to bring in the most poorest of the poor into this formal financial sector now that it's hanging in the air.
Okay, thank you. And, yep, the lady just here.
Hello, my name is Vera Okeo. I'm a journalist from the Daily Nation, but I'm here as a student at the London.
Name is?
Vera Okeo.
Vera.
Yes. My question is on inclusivity, being that I'm Kenyan. I know about the laws and the actual application. I would like to know the role where you place normal Kenyans who don't have a name that matter, because now life in Kenya is very cheap, people are killed, and the rule of law is not there. And in your government, I wonder whether if I'm educated, I'm going to go back to Kenya and do what I actually trained for, because the people you give jobs, I heard about one of your ministers are talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, and it was, for lack of a better word, he had not the slightest idea. So I'm wondering, where do you place the technical people in your government to actually make decisions about stuff like health and technical issues? Is it just about loyalty, or the people who are qualified? Do you use data? Do you use research when you make such decisions? Thank you.
Good.
Okay. There's some challenging questions for you.
Yes.
The border one seems
the
easy
first
now,
one,
right?
I think that's the one that's most straightforward. I want it to be very clear so that it doesn't go, you said everything here is on record, that first and foremost, Kenya recognizes our international boundaries. So nobody should put that out of context in one bit. We recognize our international boundaries, but equally we recognize the need for us to be able to work together with our regional brothers and sisters. And as you know, not only Kenya, but Ethiopia, Uganda, Djibouti. We all have our troops under AMISOM who are working together with the government of Somalia to restore peace and stability so that we can create an environment where we help our brothers and sisters in Somalia get back to a level where now we can focus ourselves on the issues that concern and affect the people. We are working together to see how we can ultimately deal conclusively with the terrorism threat. We are working to train the Somali army to be able to take up its responsibility, because we equally recognize that AMISOM cannot be there forever. This is a role that must be handed over to the government and people of Somalia to be able to manage their own affairs. We are only there in a supporting capacity. We are not there permanently. I think the last thing I want to say is that Kenya equally, and so does the AU, will recognize the constitution, the federal constitution of Somalia, that recognizes the regions, and ours always has been to encourage all these regions to work together with the national government with a view of bringing that country back to a path of peace, stability, and ultimate prosperity of her people. And Kenya will always be counted on as a partner in that endeavor. I think I've answered that one. So we're not here talking about borders. Yeah. Angela, on interest caps, again, that is why we're saying that it is clear to all. There was a lot of pressure, ultimately, that this was going to be the way to make capital available to SMEs and to small traders at much more affordable rates. What I'm saying, it is now quite obvious that that has not actually transpired. And that is why we're saying we need to be able to relook at that law in order to ensure that while we try and protect the smallest lender, we must make sure we do so in an environment where he has access to that capital. And that is the law and the manner in which we are now working together with our National Assembly and all stakeholders to see what is it that we can do, because what we have tried already has proven not to work. So this is work in progress, and like I said, we are hoping that during our upcoming financial bill that we will have been able to have engaged positively with all stakeholders to ensure that we are able to deal both with the original problem that we thought we needed to deal with, but also ensure that we remove these caps that have proved not to work and actually ended up hurting our financial sector. Vera, on the issues of inclusivity, from my point of view, Kenya is a country that abides and lives by the rule of law, and we have always maintained that we respect that law. Anybody who has ever or has a complaint against the fact that he or she has been mistreated, there is an independent commission that has been set up to deal with those particular issues. Each organization, from the judiciary, it is not Uhuru Kenyatta who employs all government employees. Actually, all the employees that I have, which are largely my ministers and my principal secretaries, are appointed on the back of parliamentary approval. I cannot appoint a cabinet secretary or a principal secretary without the approval of the National Assembly. So they're all out there and all in the public. And anybody who has ever gone through any of the other institutions and who has a complaint on the manner in which recruitment has been carried out in any organization, we have now created institutions where you can officially go and lodge your formal complaint, because like I said, our principle, our objective is fairness, is just, and every single Kenyan must feel that they are part and parcel of our society.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm really sorry that we have run out of time. I know that there are a lot more questions that people wanted to ask, but thank you to all those who asked questions. I wanted to thank you very much for setting out so very clearly your view of the challenges facing democracy in a modern world, particularly with respect to the political, security, economic and social challenges that not just the world faces, but that Kenya faces. I also think that the comments that you made in relation to trade will be warmly welcomed by the British government, so we'll make sure that they know what you said. But also thank you for taking the time to answer so many questions. We very much appreciate that. And can I remind everyone of Kenya's strategic importance. Kenya is a country which has to work if what we want for the African continent, which is growth and prosperity, and real use of the potential on the continent in terms of its young people. So we all wish you, your government and Kenya well. To the audience, can I ask you to please stay seated while the President leaves? I know that there will be many of you that want to take selfies. Can you please resist? Mr. President, thank you very much again. Thank you
very much.